Well, hello everyone. I wanted to put together a lecture here to get into some of this material out of our next chapter, talking about employee motivation. And I want to hit upon some of the aspects of what really influences employee motivation, all right? And the effect of things such as your personality, your view of self, and so on. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, one of the big questions that comes along is this: the motivation that an employee has, do they bring that to their job? Yes or no? And anyone who's worked in business and management will probably tell you a most definite yes. Some employees show up with higher levels of motivation. Some employees show up with sort of, we'll call average motivation. And some employees show up with little or minimal motivation. And you really do start to wonder, okay, what's going on here? What's the difference? And why does this happen? One of the reasons this does occur, okay, is a person's personality. No joke. Your personality can really influence your level of motivation. This has been studied and researched in great detail and pretty much been proven accurate. And one of the best ways to look at this, okay, the concept of personality, your behavior, your thoughts, your attitudes, and how that influences your motivation, is to look at a theory called the Big Five. The Big Five factor of personality. So a lot of different theories of how your personality develops, but this one's been around for about 20, 25 plus years, and it really has a good footing. It's been researched and detailed and studied, and explains a lot of motivation in many different realms, including in the workforce. Now, the Big Five factor of personality talk about just that, the biggest five factors that influence who you are. And here they are. The first is, how open are you to experience? Now, some people are very open to new experiences, all right? They like to try new things. They like to see what's out there. A new business comes along, restaurant, they want to give it a go, and so on and so forth. They would be high on this openness to experience scale. Some call it the O scale, for openness to experience. Some people are low on the openness to experience. They tend to have been set in their ways. They're not interested in new things. They're not hateful of them, but that's just their style. You know, they're very conventional and set in their ways. Extroversion. Extroverts are people who turn around and are very outgoing. People with high E scores tend to be more vocal. They'll be more outward in their behavior and things of that sort, might share an opinion, a comment, might do things because they have what we sometimes call a high E score for extrovert. If you have a low E score in terms of being on the extroversion scale, that's called introverted. And introverts are just that sometimes. They're the people who turn around and keep more to themselves. They don't always end up being the first to speak up. They may withdraw, and they're quite happy with that. All right. So you can have a high E or a low E score, and it doesn't mean you're right or wrong in that regard. Okay. There's agreeableness. How open are you to things and so on and so forth? Or maybe you're not. Okay, that is a little different from openness to experience, but you like things or you don't like things. There is emotional stability. Are you one who is very anxious and very nervous and very worrying? That might be low on the N scale. Or if you are much more calm and can handle stressful situations, you might have a lot of emotional stability. So if you're nervousness and worrying, you're high on the N scale. Let me clarify that. And if you're more stable, you don't get worked up over things, you have a low N score. The one that really determines it all is this last category: conscientiousness. Conscientiousness of the five factors is the one that says the most about motivation, employee motivation. Are you conscientious? Are you believing in yourself? Do you want to see the whole picture? Are you willing to take in the whole picture? Are you aware of that and want to embrace that? Some people who are high on the C scale tend to have a higher view of self, and those that tend to be low on the C scale tend to have a lower view of self. So, is employee motivation predetermined? That conscientiousness aspect leads us to a discussion of self-esteem. And when it comes to self-esteem, self-esteem is how you see yourself. All right? It's a combination of how you see yourself internally versus how you see yourself externally. That combined makes up your self-esteem. Research has told us for a long time that employees who are high in self-esteem, okay, they see themselves in a positive light, tend to perform better than employees who don't think they're very smart, who don't think that they're very good at things. What's fascinating about this is that a lot of employees with high self-esteem look to do well. They want to do well because they believe they can do well. Employees with lower self-esteem tend to not see it that way. They don't think they're very bright. They don't think they're very smart. They don't go after the challenging jobs. They look at the most basic of jobs, and that's how they tend to perceive themselves. Now, you may be thinking to yourself that you've seen an awful lot of maybe young employees who come in and as far as their mindset goes, they have high self-esteem that they can do it all and they deserve it all, but they don't necessarily tend to have the knowledge and the background to back up the self-esteem. And I agree, that does happen. When I'm talking about self-esteem in this vein, what I'm talking about is as you enter the job. Once you know what the job is, once you know the factors involved, where does your self-esteem lie at that point? I get a lot of students who turn around and come in believing that they can do great things. That's fine. When I start to explain to them what has to be done to pass a class or to get an A, because that's what everyone worries about, their self-esteem sometimes changes and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, and the reality starts to set in. So that's the aspect of self-esteem that I'm talking about. And I'll hit a little bit more about that here in a moment. We speak of what is called consistency theory. Research tells us that when it comes to consistency theory, people that have a high view of self and therefore want to do challenging things tend to be more productive. They tend to be more productive. And people who have a low view of self, sort of a lower self-esteem, once they see this, and this is who they are, they don't seek out those high challenging jobs. They seek out jobs that are more simple, more basic. Their productivity reflects that. They're not looking to do the most they possibly can, low self-esteem people, because they don't think they can. All right? So their self-esteem, be it high or low, really is a reflection of their motivation. If they don't think they can do it and they have low self-esteem, they're not very motivated to go out and prove themselves wrong. If they have higher self-esteem, their motivation tends to be higher and reflects that, okay? The amount of effort and the amount of work that they do. Now, if I still haven't won you over on the idea that some employees come in with a self-esteem level that's quite high and they don't end up doing as well, let me clarify a few things. There are different types of self-esteem. In fact, there are 4 of them, and I want to talk about them right now. The first is what we call chronic self-esteem. Chronic self-esteem basically means what is your level of self-esteem pretty much all the time. Is it pretty high? Is it pretty low? Is it pretty average? Where does it fall? That's what we tend to see in people, especially when they come through our door, is that chronic self-esteem. Okay? And it's enough to make us turn around and decide, oh, I don't know that this person is or isn't right for the job. It's not a good predictor. A much better predictor of self-esteem is what's called situational self-esteem. Situational self-esteem simply means how confident are you of yourself in certain situations. in speaking situations, in situations where you're dealing with analytics, in situations where there's a bit of intensive problem solving, in situations where you have to handle conflict, that and many more situations. How do you handle those things? If you feel good about yourself, except when you turn around and have to do public speaking, and maybe a job requires a lot of public speaking, then in reality, your self-esteem is not near as high. We also talk about what is called social self-esteem. And social self-esteem is your view of self based off of how other people see you, how other people respond to you, and stuff like that. We do see an awful lot of this in some teens and some adults when it comes to the social media platforms. Their whole self-esteem is tied into the number of likes they get to a post, to something they put on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook and things of that sort, and they get upset if they don't get a lot of them and so on. It's very unhealthy because you're relying on someone else to develop your character. A lot of kids, unfortunately, do turn around and do this very thing, and it really is, of the four, probably the least predictive of what should be your abilities, and yet it's what a lot of some generations rely on the most. The last one I want to talk about here is very specialized, very specific, organizational-based self-esteem, OBSE. With OBSE, what we're talking about is how good are you, not in just general categories of dealing with conflict and problem solving and talking to crowds, but more specifically the job itself. How good are you at taking care of customer needs? How good are you at conducting an audit? How good are you at dealing with patients if you're in the medical field and so on? How good are you at doing the tasks that are very specialized to the job? OBSE self-esteem is probably one of the best predictors of overall success. And that sort of goes without saying. If a person feels they can do a job such as auditing and they're good at auditing, then they go into an auditing job, they can handle that. I might turn around and say, if I'm given a teaching of a psychology topic, I know my material, I know my content, I can go in there, I can do what need be done. All right. OBSE is by and far the best type of self-esteem in terms of predicting success in the workplace. So that's one worth noting. So how do you make someone's how do you make someone's self-esteem better? And is that possible? Well, we have tried. We have worked on that. One thing that we talk about, and your book has a slightly different name for it than what I'm giving it. I've always heard it called self-esteem training. And the idea behind self-esteem training is this: to turn around and prepare people is to influence their self-esteem to the good, is to give them tasks. Give them tasks to complete. And some of the tasks start easy. Some of the tasks are quite simple. And let people see that they can do them. Your book talks about the idea of going through a conditioning training program, something a person may not think they can do, but if they stick with it, they realize, oh my gosh, after 12 weeks, I can do a lot better. Maybe it is lose weight. I can run a mile or 2 miles. I can do these other things that I could not do before. And the idea behind self-esteem training is that if they realize they can do a lot of things, in this vein, maybe they realize they can start doing other things. To me, the best example of self-esteem training is the military and basic training. How many people have a dream of going into one of the armed forces? They want to go into the Navy. They want to go in the Air Force. They want to go into the Marine Corps, the Army, whichever. And the first thing they have to do is go through basic training. And a lot of people get in there, trust me on this, and at first, as they start basic training, they really do start to wonder if they can make this happen. I don't know if I can do this, all right? But as they get in and they learn what they need to learn, all right, how things are done, how things are handled, how to respond to certain situations, sometimes you start to realize, I can do this. Oh my God, I can do this. And it really leaves us open to what else can we possibly do. Another one, and this sort of is an extension of self-esteem training, is experience with success. Okay, so this sort of extends what I just said. The self-fulfilling prophecy says that employees behave in ways that is consistent with their view of self. Okay, if they think highly of themselves, they tend to do well at things. If they do not think highly of themselves, they tend not to do well at things. If they go through training and people believe in them, they sometimes raise up to the level that individuals, drill sergeants, managers, a boss, even friends believe they can do. Okay, that's a lot of what the self-fulfilling prophecy is about. Employees will behave in ways that's consistent with their view of self, and their view of self can be influenced by people around them and their experience with success. That leads us to what is called the Galatea effect. Now, the Galatea effect, as you see there, just says the higher your expectations for yourself, okay, the higher your level of performance. If a person turns around and says, I can do this, and the task is quite challenging, and it might take some time, and there may be shortfalls and pitfalls and times you struggle, but by God, you're going to do this, then you tend to do better at it. All right. I think I see that sometimes in today's youth when they're, riding skateboards and doing different things and they're trying their flips and all the different aspects. I don't claim I know them all, but boy, they keep trying and trying because they believe in it. That's called the Galatea effect. And a lot of times they do get it done and they do get better at what they do. And it really does make a difference. All right. So once you start to have some success at it, people tend to be even more motivated. And then finally, one of the last things that really can influence your self-esteem is your boss. We talk about this in parenting. We talk about this in jobs. All right. Your supervisor can have quite the impact upon your overall success. If your supervisor, he or she, turns around and gives you positive feedback, tells you, notices when you do well, assists you if you need a bit of assistance, gives you some genuine positive feedback to certain tasks, especially when they're challenging and you've accomplished them. We call that the Pygmalion effect. And people tend to get a higher self-esteem. They, a lot of times, think more highly of themselves for all the effort that they put in. Okay. We also see what is called the golem effect, which is those managers, those supervisors who are quite negative. Okay, I don't think you're going to be able to do this. All right, you're sort of proving to me that you're as forgive me for saying this, but it's just an example. You're as stupid as I thought you were. All right, a lot of times that doesn't motivate people to try harder. Okay, so what I'm telling you is that your boss, your manager really does have an impact upon your ability to turn around and do better at a job and feel better about oneself. And if you feel better about oneself, you're more motivated to keep on going. All right. That leads us to the very last thing I want to mention here, and that is the concept of intrinsic motivation. Now, I put up there extrinsic versus intrinsic because I wanted to find the difference between the two. Extrinsic motivation basically occurs when your motivation to do a task is based off the idea that you are going to get something for your time and trouble. You work at a job and you're going to get paid. You work harder at a job, you get more pay. You put a lot of effort into a job, you get a lot more out of it. All right, that's extrinsic. There's an understanding that you're going to get something external, something tangible for your time and trouble. With an intrinsic motivator, okay, motivation comes from within. I have asked the students in the classroom before, something such as, do any of you play a musical instrument? And I'll get people occasionally raise their hands. Yes, I play the piano, the keyboards. I play the guitar. I play, the saxophone or the trumpet or the drums. I've heard that. And I've asked people, I said, are you in a band? No. Are you wanting to play with an orchestra? No. Then why do you do it? And I'm sort of like, I just like it. Okay, I just like doing it. That's intrinsic motivation. They do it because they just like doing it. All right. It is a blessing to get an employee who loves to do the job they do because they are intrinsically motivated. Nothing is better. It's hard to find them. They don't come easy, but they do. The person who turns around and rides their skateboard and gets even better. A person who turns around and plays video games and gets even better. They're not getting paid for it. It's all intrinsic. The reward comes from within. And getting back to work, if you can find people like this, they're quite the find, because they come to work because they like being at work. Fantastic state to be in. Let me give you one little bit of advice, okay? Oh, and one last example. All the YouTube videos that I can come across on how to fix this, how to make that, how to bake this, how to repair that on YouTube, that a lot of people don't get paid for, all right? But they go to all the trouble to put it together just to be kind and just to be helpful. That's extrinsic motivation. Okay, last word of warning. If people are intrinsically motivated, it has been thought that if we start to give them rewards or promise them rewards, they'll become even more motivated. And the research finds that's not true. That is actually not true. When intrinsic motivation is occurring, you really don't want to start offering external incentives to keep it going. It doesn't tend to work well. All right. It's like someone who turns around and writes music and songs, and they enjoy doing that, and they want to be a big star. Okay. So they get a contract. They actually get found and they get a contract. This is fantastic. And someone says, okay, you're going to get this amount of money, but you've got to write me 8 more songs, and I need to have them before the end of the month. All right. Or the end of next month. Suddenly you're applying an extrinsic motivator instead of an intrinsic. And intrinsic motivation tends to fall off. Doesn't do as well. Someone that plays sports and enjoys it through high school and college, you get to the level that you can play it professionally, but now you get money and you get bonuses based on how well you do. And some people find the joy of the sport sort of goes away. So be a little cautious. Enjoy the intrinsically motivated people, but don't go approaching them with lots of extras. It may be your downfall. Okay, that's enough for now. Take care.